Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Sharyn Alexander from Sun Summit Metals. In this interview, we discuss Sharyn's thesis for gold as a whole. We also discuss the challenges of running a gold exploration company in a market where retail investors haven't fully bought in. And then we get into Sun Summit Metals, which I think is a really interesting company in the sense that they've hit some really big drill holes in the past. There's been a ton of money spent drilling this project historically, in some cases all the way back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the one thing I've learned about a great gold market is that the sophisticated investors, or the smart money, as you might put it, loves when a property has been drilled like Swiss cheese. Well, in this case, that's exactly what Sun Summit Metals has on their hands. I think that this is a really interesting gold project if you're looking for a gold stock that has a lot of torque, if you think that there's going to be some big tailwinds coming into gold. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Sharyn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I always like to ask CEOs of mining companies, when it's our first time having them on especially, when they are exploring for a certain type of commodity, there must be a reason that they get out of bed in the morning and they get excited about that particular commodity. When it comes to gold, what is it you think about when you think about gold and why you're excited about where gold could be heading?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think a lot of, or maybe a lot of CEOs do really have that strong connection to the commodity. I mean, just in terms of my background, I am a geologist and I started out in kimberlite exploration. And so that's in the diamond industry.
Yes.
And then I moved over to gold. So I kind of joke that, diamonds and gold is where my heart is. I'm not so much of a jewelry person, but in terms of gold, there's a lot of uses outside of the jewelry world in terms of like electronics, and it's not considered a critical metal in Canada in terms of battery metals and lithium and nickel and copper and things like that. But I think gold definitely, not just for being a kind of a safe haven. A lot of people, do invest in gold, but I think there is a lot of interest in gold. There's definitely gold bugs out there. And I think it's time for some of this value that is going into gold. We see gold at record values, but yet it's not yet trickling down to the junior companies. So I think it's about time that we start to get some of the investors moving back into the space, investing in gold. I think it really is a breakout story just waiting to happen, just looking at the gold values and the way that the gold has been performing lately.
So I know that there is there's an inflationary cost to mining gold, but when we look at the price of gold 5 years ago, it was under $1,300. Today, and today as we speak, there was a CPI print that came in higher than expected and gold's down, but still above $2,000. So we've effectively gone from $1,300 to $2,000. Yet when I look at Sun Summit's stock, and this isn't by any means saying anything negative about Sun Summit, but the share price over the last 5 years is down 84%, despite the fact that the commodity is up massively. And that's true across the board for a lot of gold deals. I look at so many gold companies that have great assets. They've hit on some drill campaigns, some really great results. They've raised money at much higher prices, and here they're stuck in the mud. What do you think is happening right now with retail investors and why they're not jumping in to gold names?
I definitely don't blame them. I mean, this has been a very difficult market, a challenging market for both companies and investors. Just to speak particularly about Sun Summit, in 2020 and 2021, we had a high-grade gold discovery at our Buck project. And in my experience, at least, these high grades really get the market attention. We were able to bring in a lot of investors, a lot of retail investors, a lot of people who maybe would not have invested in more of a bulk tonnage story, which is what our Buck project really is. And so I think just not being able to follow up on that high grade and really pushing this bulk tonnage story. I mean, bulk tonnage is not as sexy. And so maybe, retail investors can't see the immediate value of a bulk tonnage type project. I mean, these projects really are, I don't want to say marginal, but when you factor in the cost of mining and infrastructure and things like that, these projects wouldn't have been feasible in the 80s when the price of gold was, $200, $300. So really now they're becoming economic, but it doesn't have that appeal that maybe a high grade system might. You are seeing some high grade projects like Snowline, for example, really capturing that market attention, the Great Bears and all of that. I think those are these high grade stories that really are kind of like retail darlings. But I think as well, just the general volatility of the market in the past year or more. I mean, this has been a very challenging bear market. It's unpredictable. The cost of living is so high. People are selling for a variety of reasons. So it is pretty unprecedented. But I think those stories with, really good fundamentals and are ready to go as soon as these retail investors return back to the market, I think they're really going to benefit. And that's what we're trying to position Sun Summit as.
I actually think about Great Bear a lot because there's companies that I think have sort of hit drill holes that aren't that far off of those drill holes that Great Bear hit early on in 2020, and how it was almost like the perfectly ran junior mining company. The stock almost went straight up. They raised money, they drilled, they moved the project forward, and then they were taken out. And the thing that I think about a lot with Great Bear is if Great Bear existed today and, they did a couple small raises and hit those same drill holes, would the company have been as successful as it ended up being? Or was it just a function of being able to execute quickly at a time where there was just such tremendous tailwinds at their back?
I think that's a really good question. I think Great Bear definitely benefited from, market conditions at the time. However, Chris Taylor did an amazing job. They are kind of the best scenario of how to run a junior exploration company in terms of, continual drilling, raising money at higher levels every time, and then getting bought out for a lot of money by a major. So that is kind of like the gold standard of what we're looking for. I think like with anything in the junior mining space, luck and timing does have a lot to do with it. Not to say that, they could have done it with a different team. They had a fantastic team. But yeah, I think if they were doing the same thing now, I think they would see some challenges. Definitely. However, I mean, it really is a great story to look at. And Snowline is an example now of a company in recent times that has really been able to put out these really high value results. The market is paying attention, but what's to say that they couldn't be even higher if it was a better market, which is probably would have been the case. So timing and luck. And yeah, you just got to be ready for when things change, which, as you know, is very often and very quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Sun Summit Metals. It's the first time we've had you on. Can you give us a high level overview of the company for our audience new to the story?
So we're a junior explorer in British Columbia. We have two projects, our Buck project in central BC. So this is more of a bulk tonnage gold, silver, zinc system, 52,000 hectares down there. And then we've just optioned the JD project in the Toodoggone. And so this is north central BC. It's a combination of high grade epithermal gold and silver, and then as well has copper, gold, porphyry potential. So our targets range from advanced exploration to grassroots. We are putting initial mineral resource estimate on the Buck main system in the Buck project. So that'll give us some, tangible value on that project there. So we have a great team with BC experience, great jurisdiction. Both projects have existing infrastructure. And yeah, this is really going to be a pivotal year for the company.
So you mentioned that the company is focused on bulk tonnage. For our audience who doesn't really know what that means, could you maybe explain what you mean by bulk tonnage?
So at the Buck main system, the mineralization is really disseminated throughout the rock. So we don't get like a high grade vein, which we can trace over several drill holes. The mineralization came through in the more porous rocks and it's disseminated throughout. And so instead of, as I mentioned, mining just, a single vein, it would be more of a bulk kind of scenario where we'd remove a lot of ground. Most likely this would be an open pit scenario. The margins would be a bit closer in that these grades are not super high. We're talking half a gram, 0.7 gram per ton gold, but these projects can work. One of the analogs for the Buck Main system is the Blackwater Gold Project, and that's just located to the southeast. So they have more of this disseminated mineralization. Their proven and probable reserves are 8 million ounces at 0.75 gram per ton gold. So not super high grade, but when you have the size and scale, as well as the infrastructure and, be in the right jurisdiction, it definitely can become economic. And then in terms of permitting, they got their permit very quickly from the BC government, and they are expecting their first gold pour later this year. So that proves that a bulk tonnage system not only can be economic, but can be permitted in British Columbia.
It's funny you say Blackwater, because that was the first name I was thinking of as you described the project. One question that I love asking exploration companies, and I have a feeling from looking at your website, I'm going to like the answer to this, but how much money or how much historic drilling has been done on the project?
So do you mean the JD project, the new project we optioned?
Or on the
Buck project. So at Buck, there was historic drilling. It was drilled on and off from like the 1940s. It was a placer camp. And then, of course, in the 80s and in the 80s specifically, that's when the majority of drilling was done. But of course, the price of gold just wasn't there to support it. As well, there was like copper and lead they were looking for. So really kind of all over the place exploration. But when you come into a project, later on, years later, where there's been existing drilling, that really allows us to hit the ground running. And that's the same as our JD project as well. So there's less exploration risk in that you kind of already have an idea of what's going on, but maybe the holes weren't assayed correctly. Maybe they're not verified where they are. And then as well, we have a lot more modern exploration technology we can use in the form of like, geophysics and assaying and some of these satellite imagery, LiDAR, and trying to find out really what's in the subsurface. And so revisiting these projects that already have existing exploration, I think really is going to be the next wave of discoveries and mines. Is discovery from a grassroots source where no exploration has been done in the past is really hard to do nowadays. A lot of places have been explored. And so I'm thinking these areas that have seen previous exploration, but maybe for whatever reason didn't get to the development stage, can now be attacked and really advanced quickly. And so that's what we're seeing at the Buck project.
And what about the JD project? Do you have a number of how many historic meters have been drilled, or how much money's been spent on drilling in the past?
Yeah, so they started in about the 70s. Most of the drilling was done in the 80s and 90s. And that was really some big names were there, but it was more of a condition of the timing and bad markets as to why they left. So they drilled right up to 97, 98, and then there was Briac, so they pulled out. And so there's probably about 30,000 meters that have been drilled at JD, maybe in about 300 drill holes, most of that at the Fin zone. But there's still a lot of upsize here in that the Fin zone, mostly the hanging wall has been drilled. It's still open at depth, the long strike, specifically in the footwall. And then when you drill deeper, previous explorationists were finding copper porphyry at depth. So, and then as well, it's on this whole corridor of really prospective rocks in terms of surface sampling. And then a bunch of holes have been done at the creek zone as well, only about 20 drill holes. And we're talking really high grades here. So there's that size and scale potential, 3-4 kilometers, which is really open. So again, hit the ground running, immediate drill targets. We can really advance the JD project quickly.
I'm curious, to ask you as a geologist, when you take the data that existed from, say, the 70s, 80s, or even up to the 90s, and you're looking at the tools that exist now today, like one of the tools, for example, that I just learned about are these XRF guns, where you can almost just take a gun and scan a rock and it gives you some sort of idea of the mineralization. How does it change for you when you look at that data set and you have tools today that you could use or employ that they didn't have in, say, 1997?
Definitely. It's changed the game. In terms of the data compilation and review that we're doing at JD, I call it data mining because we're essentially looking through these PDFs, we're looking through these digital files and trying to find these tidbits of information that would be helpful that we can plug into software or modeling and be able to pull out and really put together a holistic picture of what's happening in terms of the XRF. That really helped us at Buck Main. So one thing to note about the XRF, it's not very good at detecting gold and silver, so precious metals. It's more good at in terms of copper and zinc and things like that. And so there is an association with zinc with the gold and silver at Buck Main. So we'd be able to look at the core, zap it with the XRF gun, and know immediately if there was a zinc anomaly. And that would often indicate whether there was gold and silver mineralization. So we'd be able to make decisions in the field in real time about shutting a hole down, keeping it going. Maybe we should move to the next hole or not. So, I mean, that really saves on time, especially when turnaround from assay labs have been particularly slow, and you can't make those immediate decisions in the field without really knowing what results you're going to get. So definitely technology today is changing and improving the way that we explore.
Something I like to ask companies who are on here, especially for the first time, especially for retail investors, where, as you know, in Canada, there's a lot of bad actors out there with bad projects looking to take advantage of investors. Right now, we got an 11-cent stock. Where was most of the money raised? And in terms of the cap table, what can you tell us there? Where was most of the money raised? And are there any significant investors that are worth mentioning?
So just for a bit of context, this company was known as San Marco Resources. It was started by Tukey Angus, who was a significant industry player, and they had projects in Mexico. And so a lot of the investors came in through Tukey, and as well our previous CEO, Bob Willis. So there's strong connections with a lot of these broker houses and high net worth individuals. Unfortunately, Tukey passed away. And Bob, the previous CEO, he retired, and he's still our senior advisor. I talk to him daily, and we have our executive chairman, Brian Locke. So in terms of where a lot of our money is coming from, I would say through connections from our board and our team definitely has brought in a lot of retail and high net worth individuals. And then as the story is changing, as we are, putting the resource on Buck Main, we're adding on the JD project and really advancing that. We're seeing a lot more new shareholders. And so, for example, in our last placement last year, only one institution came in, the rest were high net worth and retail. And so that was a change from previous years where we did have a lot of institutions and funds coming in. So I definitely see how the retail kind of space has formed this company, and I'm very thankful for ongoing shareholder support, especially during these difficult times in the market conditions. But I think that us kind of retooling the story will help kind of bring back that shareholder value. In terms of big names, I mean, there's not really people that I can mention at this time, but we're always looking for strategic investments or, maybe corporations to come in, always sharing the story, always marketing and trying to get more interest.
So what's the next steps here? If I'm an investor watching the story over, say, the next 12 months, what am I looking out for?
A lot of catalysts and a lot of news flow. We're really rejigging the story, as I mentioned. So we're looking for that very rapid value creation. So we're going to be advancing the JD project very quickly. We have some immediate drill targets, high potential drill targets at JD. Putting tangible value on our existing assets. So that would be putting the resource on Buck Main and really know what we have here. We've been drilling there for 4 years. We have close to 100 drill holes, plus there's historic drilling we could include. And so really knowing what the value is here with ounces in the ground that could maybe attract a strategic or a partnership or transaction. And then upside potential. So discovery and expansion of some of these grassroots targets. And then as well, Buck Main is open in all directions. So maybe upsizing or triggering an expansion of the initial MRE. So as these investors come back to the space, we're really focused on shareholder value and a lot of news flow and catalysts. So I think stay tuned. We have a lot coming.
Well, Sharyn, thanks so much for hopping on here today. I think you have a very interesting project. It's one of those projects that if you're a junior mining investor that is looking for gold projects, I think is really interesting for when things do turn. I'd put it in those baskets of names that I think are highly attractive for when the tailwinds arrive. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what your results look like over the next year. And good luck as you continue to expand out your resource.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks, everyone.